The situation doesn't seem to be very good for the students around the world after the pandemics, and still during the pandemics, even if it's less felt right now. After 2 years of pandemics, we could say something about how it went and which are the most urgent points, because there are several factors which are emerging, psychological, economical, etc. So if you had to call the political systems to action, what would you the most underline?
Yeah, thank you. So the first thing that's very important for political institutions is to listen to the voice of students, which is why we commissioned the study. They're often absent from the actual discussions about the issues that impact their lives. The biggest issues we saw in the survey overwhelmingly was the mental health impact of the pandemic on students. About 60% said they actually felt the pandemic has ruined their university experience, which is very sad. And even now, about a third, when they have returned to campus, are still say they're suffering from mental health issues. And tied to that, which we saw overwhelmingly, is the cost of university and the cost of living. So most students are really struggling to afford very basic needs like rent, medicine, food. And we saw that across the board. And finally, which is not necessarily tied to the pandemic, but is a clear major issue facing students, is both climate change and the socio-economic environment, with many people being concerned about the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer.
Well, even if it was probably not the time for when the survey was done, uh, logically we could add also the war situation on the list of psychological
Yeah,
problems.
absolutely. We sadly this was conducted in January, but we can only imagine the impact of a war in continental Europe on European students right now.
Well, going to the European students, they say mostly that actually you said it, COVID ruined their learning experience. But in the same time, I can imagine that it was partially ruined also for the ways they had to study with distance learning and so on. But in the same time, they say they would like it to be more digital, more online, and even more short, even shorter, if it were cheaper. So they are ready to sacrifice something in order to save some money. So is there actually any strong economic issue arising?
Yeah, I think the cost of university and the cost of college and the outcomes of university are a major economic factor and issue for many countries. I think, first of all, the pandemic was more than just online learning. You had students who were isolated, you had students who were unable to meet their friends, and you had a lot of students who are unable to work. So when they talk about the impact of the pandemic, it's not only online education, it was a whole bucket of issues that they were facing that all of us were facing. And then what we saw over time is that universities got better at teaching online, and also students had a very mixed online experience. But a major issue is the cost of education. And overwhelmingly, students say they would like to see the cost brought down. And if that means more online tools and education, they would prefer that, or even shorter education. So I think coming out of the pandemic, what we see as a real opportunity is to rethink higher education. It still has tremendous value, but maybe there are hybrid models that could make it cheaper, make it more affordable. Maybe students don't have to live and be at campus for all 3, 4, or 2 years.
Well, there are many differences between European countries. Let's focus on Europe now, because the survey is talking also about Kenya, Russia, United States, and so on. But let's stay in Europe just to see
Yep.
some close by differences for us. I mean, from our point of view. Uh, I found it quite strange that the Germans say at 62% and the French 58%, and so they are at the top in Europe. They had to struggle with some unavoidable expenses like medical expenses, rent, bills, and so on. While the Italians, and Italy is not, it's not richer than Germany or France, they said it just in 32%. So is it only a question of cost of the university, or maybe the fact that geographically they move less, they are more linked to their families.
I think that's exactly right. So the cost of university, I think, is a major factor, and obviously different countries have different cost of living and different policies. But in Italy, for example, only 6% of students have a student loan, whereas at 46% of German undergraduates do. So I think still think the cost of college is a major factor, and of course, Italians are one of the highest countries that where people still live at home during university, and a lot even attend a local university, whereas as opposed to traveling far away. Whereas in other European countries, I'm from the United Kingdom, people want to leave home, they may want to go to a different town or city. So across Europe, you see different cultural factors affecting university, and you also see major differences in the cost of university, and of course, the cost of living as a whole.
So if I can put it this way, the Italians are less economically independent when they are students, and the average, and that's a good thing because they are still backed by the families. They live in the family and they go closer for studies if they don't go abroad.
Well,
Um,
they also sorry to interrupt you, but it costs less for them to attend university
yeah.
than in other countries.
Yeah, actually, but there's another point. If they don't have any debt because of the studies, I mean, only 6% said they had it. Maybe their families get indebted in order to finance the studies.
Yes, that is true. I'm not an expert on Italian student debt. In America, we see a lot of families take on the debt of students, and it's a major issue.
Okay, I think we had just a frame of the problem. I mean, obviously that's a multifaceted problem. It's a big issue. There are huge differences which are not easy to be underlined in such a survey, even if it's long and complete. I mean, the difference between the systems, the teaching and learning systems in different countries. But many Italians, for example, are studying abroad.
Yes.
And many years ago, during the Greek crisis, I was talking with some families, some grandfathers, and they said we have to, with our pension, we have to pay for 3 generations, and if the children have to look for a job, they have to go abroad and to study in the
Correct.
UK, and that's not affordable, and so on. So it's not only concerning British students in the UK, but the UK is very attractive even after the Brexit. And so many other families coming from other countries have to afford it, isn't it?
Yes, yes, that's true. I mean, the UK has a great has still has a growing economy despite Brexit, but it is actually one of the more expensive places in Europe, to continental Europe, to go to study. I think university tuition fees in the United Kingdom are around £9,500, so actually quite higher than the rest of Europe.
Plus the flats and
Yeah, plus the cost
living
of
costs and so on. So if you have to launch an appeal about the economical part of all that, it's especially addressed to the United Kingdom.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very unfortunate that we actually see students having to choose between eating and studying. And I think most countries would see that as a tragedy.